you are or you were in the past, but you demoted yourself simply because you never wanted to be enough as us. Okay, so in this video I'm going to be talking about the humility myth. The humility myth. What's humility? What does it mean to be humble? Now, I'm not going to give you my own words. Instead, I'm going to tell you what the New Oxford American Dictionary has to say about what humility is. And it says, it's a modest or low view of one's own importance. In other words, humbleness. And what does it mean to be humble? Well, it means having or showing a modest or low estimate of one's importance. Now, that's what the dictionary says. Let me tell you a little story about myself. For many years, and I'm seeing myself now as a little girl who was gifted, a little girl who could sing, could act, was so smart, remembered so many things, a little girl who was a quick learner, someone who never required an adult or required schooling or anything of the sort to learn something, someone who could just by looking and doing her own research would teach herself how to do so many things, so many things. I go back to the age of 9, and I feel a little bit emotional talking about it. I go back to the age of 9 when I started driving, like officially driving a car. I was 9 years old. I was never taught how to drive a car. I never took any driving lessons. And how it started is maybe from around 6, 7, 8, thereabout, I would often have these dreams of being in the car with my parents and something would happen. For example, let's say my dad would faint or something happened to my mom, and then I was the only person in the car and I have to save everybody. That's the responsibility that I had. And then the dream would get really bad because it dawned on me in the dream that I could not drive. So it was just so important to me from then to learn how to drive. So over the years, I would just watch my parents or anybody who's at the wheel. I would pay close attention. I would watch how they maneuver the vehicle, how they would turn the steering wheel, how they put the car in gear. I would pay attention to the smallest details until I just knew within myself that I knew how to drive. I just knew how to do it. And I would pester my mother especially. I would pester her. Mom, I know how to drive. Mom, just please let me drive. Mom, trust me, I can do it. I can do it. And it so happened that, my mom just grew really tired of me. And I think it might have been a Sunday. She called my dad, just completely frustrated, and she just had it. She called my dad and she said, listen, just take her in the car, right? Just take her in the car. I'm tired of this now. You deal with her. So my dad, said, okay, Ebony, come. And the car was parked. The car was parked around the back. And in order for you to get the car around, you have to go in reverse, right? So you have to reverse the car from around the back of the house, and then you come around to the side and then around to the front, and then you can go in drive to drive up the driveway. Anyhow, got in the car with my dad, and of course he was a little bit cautious. His hand, I remember his hand was on the emergency brake. But long and short of the story is, I put the car in reverse and I used the mirrors. So I used the mirrors and I reversed the car from around the from the back of the house all the way around to the front, and then I went in drive and drove down the driveway. Everybody was shocked. Everybody was shocked. My mom created this whole excitement, called my uncle. When my uncle came in the car as well, I was driving up and down, and he said, listen to me, I would give you your driver's license right now. And that's how I started driving. That's how I started driving. And I'm talking about this story because, yes, this is just one example. And it's not me saying, oh, you know, I'm just amazing, which I am, because what we tell ourselves so amazing, you know. But there's so many things that I've learned and so many things that I can do. And for many years, I never recognized them as being special. I never saw myself as the talented or gifted person that I really am. Why? Because it was somehow inculcated in me from very, very young that I had to be humble. I had to humble myself. So right throughout school, especially high school, I stayed in the shadows. I was able to sing, do speech, so many things when it comes on to the arts. And in high school, I never did any of those activities. Instead, I pushed others up. I promoted others and demoted myself. Why? Because it was somehow in my brain that I had to remain humble. And this idea stayed with me for so many years. And that's the reason I'm now talking about the myth of humility. The humility myth. I know that there are so many of you who can share your own stories about how gifted, how talented and promising you are or you were in the past, but you demoted yourself simply because you never wanted to be enough, as us Jamaicans say. Well, let me tell you, no. Rest that belief. Put it aside. Put that aside. So let me tell you some of the points. I wrote 4 points here in one of my diaries. I wrote 4 points here about just how humility has, or the wrong ideas that we've had of humility. So I'll share those 4 points that I came up with you. 1, to be humble means to ignore or bury one's gifts. It means you're not to be seen, you're not to be heard, you're not to be visible. So even though you know how to do something, you're great at doing something, because of humility, you should first make yourself low and push others up. Now that, my friends, is a complete myth. That is a myth. Humility does not mean you are to bury your gifts. Humility means you are to use those gifts. However, recognize that you are not the giver of those gifts. Recognize the giver of those gifts. You understand what I'm saying? So yes, we're gifted. Yes, we have these skills, we have these abilities, but we do not take the credit for ourselves. We know we are like this, but we know that we were given this gift. And it's for that reason we must use them. Out of gratitude for being bestowed these gifts, it is our right to use these gifts. It doesn't mean you're going to brag. It doesn't mean you're going to boast. But it means you build on these gifts. You unleash these gifts, because these gifts or what are going to make this world a better place. And the world has space for our gifts. The world has space for your gifts. So stop hiding. Stop burying. Let me tell you, I wish I knew this many, many years ago. So stop hiding. So that's myth number one. Myth number two, to be humble means to be fearful of recognition. So it means to be fearful of recognition. So for example, you're in school or you're at the workplace and you're doing a good job. You may have some brilliant ideas. You may come up with some efficient ways of getting a certain task done, but you don't really do it, you kind of shy away from it because you're humble. You should not like to be recognized. I can think of so many times, especially when I was in college. This is one thing I would do. I would be in class and the lecturer is there and I have a point, I have an idea, I have the answer. But instead of me raising my hand to be recognized, I would touch my friend and I would write something on paper or whisper to my friend and then have my friend share. Because I was humble, I was being modest. I was very fearful of being recognized. But guess what? Once again, brings me to the first point. You have a gift, you have the talent, you have the ability. Don't be afraid. The world has space for your ideas. The world has space for your thoughts. Myth number three, to be humble means one should not strive for greatness. So you should just settle for what's here. Settle for what's already established. You should not strive for greatness because in striving, it means one, you're going to be recognized, and two, you will have to make use of those gifts that you were given. That, my friends, is a big fat lie. That is a big fat myth. Strive for greatness because you recognize that the giver of your gifts is great, is perfect. And myth number four, to be humble means to support or promote others while demoting or making yourself low. So you have the ideas, you have the gifts, you have the talent, but you're just pushing others up and pulling yourself down. Now, don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong for a second. As human beings, we really should support and promote others. Of course, you have your friends, you have your co-workers, so many people around you where you push them up, you promote them, you help them to be great. But what is bad and a huge injustice is when you, in the same breath, demote yourself, when you underestimate, belittle, and depreciate the value that you have. Now that is where the myth comes in. Instead, with the gifts, the talents, this purpose that we have, we should push and promote and support others, and in turn promote ourselves because we recognize our worth. I feel like me I preach. We recognize our worth. So humility really means, then let me just quickly recap. You recognize that the gifts that you've been bestowed, and notice I choose the word bestowed. You recognize that these gifts were given to you for a purpose. You recognize that you are not the giver of these gifts. You are the receiver of these gifts. And out of gratitude, out of sincerity, you give the world these gifts. You build upon these gifts and recognize once again that the world has space for you. All right, I'm going to stop here. Because one of the things with me now is, so once I start talking, I will go on and on and on and on and on. But I have more content to come. I'm going to be talking about when I was able to recognize this. I'm going to talk about my own journey. I'm going to talk about how I was able to do so many things even while I was afraid, simply because I recognized that I have something great to offer and I recognize my true purpose. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want you to remember, everybody, stop putting things off. Get started. Instead of saying one day, remember day one. See you in the next